Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Hondo Carpenter. I'm also your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI. It's great to be with you today. We are continuing a five-part series today. This is part four of facts about the Raiders as we approach training camp. We've gone over several of them, and we've talked about leadership from the coaching perspective up through management and ownership and how they are now fundamentally aligned. But there's something on this Raider team that I think is another good thing that they now have that's fair and germane to talk about, and that is leadership from a player perspective. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Davante Adams, everyone knew when he came here, was a great player. But being a great player doesn't make you a great leader. And when a great player is not a great leader, it is extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. And I want to make this abundantly clear. While I believe that Davante was evidence of problems within the organization, I do not blame Davante for the problems in the organization. For example, the fruit reveals the root. And so I think the problems that you saw surrounding Davante, certainly he contributed to. I'm not pretending he didn't. But I believe it was the fruit of a organization in trouble. Um, Not all of it on Davante. So you had a Davante Adams who was not a good leader. Now, I, so Davante didn't like something and he would make it very clear. I remember one time, one of our reporters, not me, he got mad at reporters in the locker room. It wasn't me, and there were three of them there, and just trying to make his point clear. One of his teammates told me a story where they asked him about why do you act this way or say whatever, and just his answer just kind of really frustrated the player. Um, and Davante, in my opinion, was not even close to a leader. And so you have a very good player, but and I've told you this before, Irvin Magic Johnson once told me, you can't be a great player without making others around you better. I don't think Davante's a great player because I don't know who he's made better. Aaron Rodgers made him better. He clearly hasn't been Davante without Aaron in the NFL. Um, in other areas I've talked about. So when you've got those players, that's dangerous. It's part of why one of the biggest blunders the Raiders made this offseason was letting Robert Spillane go. And I've discussed it at ad nauseum, so I'm not going to get into it in this podcast. You just don't let those type of players who are also leaders. Well, the Raiders are assimilating great and good players who also are leaders. So let me go over a couple of examples. Brock Bowers is not a Max Crosby type leader, but he's a rookie who is very pro his team and teammates, willing to help guys. He was only a rookie. He wasn't in a place to sit there and cuss somebody out for not doing their job, but he demonstrated great leadership skills. Jacoby Myers, same real situation, some leadership skills. But let's look at who the Raiders do have. First of all, Max Crosby, I believe, top three communicator in the entire league of all players. You got to have that one bell cow guy who says, get on my back, I'm taking you there. It very rarely works when you've got two. I've seen it, but it is really, really rare. Um, and so Max Crosby, I've said it before, Mark Davis is the owner, Spytek's the GM, Pete Carroll's the coach, but it's Max Crosby's team. But then you look across and you see some other interesting things. Colton Miller is um, Colton Miller is a guy that is a tremendous leader. Colton Miller is a guy that um, absolutely um, leads. He's vocal, but he's not Max. And so let me explain where I'm coming at that with this is when you understand Colton Miller isn't going to scream and yell and be a Max. He doesn't have to be. Colton Miller absolutely holds that offensive line accountable. Colton Miller absolutely goes and brings leadership. He's willing to call guys out. He's not going to do it publicly. He's going to do it behind closed doors. But that's who he is. You got a solid leader on that offensive line. Okay. Jacoby leads by example, which those guys are fine. And but he also isn't afraid to speak up a little bit. Not like Colton and not like Max. But then you got Gino. Gino is absolutely not Max as far as expression, but but like Max in demonstration. So he's not going to express himself like Max, but he is going to demonstrate the same quality as Max. So you got that now on offense and defense. The Raiders need it is just the essence of the quarterback position. You've got to have that. And I'm going to tell you something. Players are already talking about Gino's leadership ability. I had a player tell me this. I don't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, but either the last day of mini camp or second to last day of mini camp, he walked up to a player and was really talking, a defensive player, about what part of his game he liked. And the defensive player told me that he had noticed it on film. And that meant a lot to the defensive player. And that he's looking at that stuff. He's paying attention to that stuff. So here he is, not only helping offensive guys, he's helping defensive guys. I heard another story about him going up to a young player who may not even make the 53, giving him advice about, hey, here's what a quarterback sees when you do this, this, and this. So now you've got that. You lose a Spills, which was huge. You add in a Landon and a Devin who are already demonstrating leadership skills. Jeremy Chin, same way. This Raider team has more player quality leadership on it right now than it's had in the 6 years I've covered this team. That's factual. And Aiden O'Connell, wonderful kid. Geno Smith is not the player today that he was after going into his third year in the league. But Aiden O'Connell lacked that ability to get in the huddle and just hammer down, to get in some guys' faces, to make points clear. Didn't mean he was a bad kid. Didn't mean he was a bad player. It's just he's got to grow into that. That's very hard. CJ Stroud did it, um, which was a really big deal. You saw the Rook in Washington do it last year, but even Peyton Manning in year one wasn't that guy. He was in year 2, but not year 1. It's hard to be that guy when you're not playing well. Just the reality of the situation. And so when you've got guys playing well, then they feel comfortable. Adam Butler, great leader on this defense. Not Max, doesn't have to be Max, but certainly a Gino. And so when you start to see players take a leadership role and hold each other accountable, I will never forget this story. Uh, I thought it was a fascinating story. Um, Barry Switzer told me this. So he's coaching Dallas, and Barry was not the greatest disciplinarian in the world, but he was going to go get after a player. And he said he's walking towards the player, and Troy Aikman was just going off on the guy. And Barry was mad, told me he was really, really mad, but said, I instantly started feeling bad for this guy because Troy was 10 times madder and going after him hard. And he talked about them winning that Super Bowl, that team had so many really good leaders that it was a player-led team. Now, I've shared this before. Tom Izzo, the Hall of Fame basketball coach at Michigan State, and a dear friend of mine, has a saying that a player-coached team is better than a coach-coached team. And what he literally means is he coaches his leaders coach the team. Players holding players accountable. That's going on now. There was one player on the Raiders who would have verbally called out Devontae. One. And there are others who were frustrated with him and probably handled it privately, but it wasn't a groundswell. If Devontae Adams were on this team now, I could tell you of 15 guys to 20 that would have jumped on certain things and said, enough's enough. And again, I think there were 3 or 4 or 5, maybe. But now some guys have grown up, some have matured, some are new guys in the building. Pete Carroll wants that. He's not afraid of strong leaders. Spytek, Telesco, Ziegler, they like that. And they wanted that. They brought in certain players. But Pete Carroll and John Spytek crave it. They want player-led teams, accountability. Let's go. Let's make this happen. Cut that out. And that is something that has really stood out to me since the end, since Pete got the job. I've had more than one player talk to me, different verbiage, but they feel empowered by Pete to lead. He wants that. Pete knows he's the boss, so he doesn't have to walk around. And Josh McDaniels did this a lot. A great guy. People liked him. So there'd be times it was like he was flexing his muscles just to show everybody, hey, I'm the head coach. Everybody knew it. And it wasn't necessary. And when you get to Pete, I know I'm the boss. When it's time to flex, I will, but I don't have to. I want you guys to flex. It's your team. And these players have bought in. Now, here is another area with this team that I find to be nothing short of fascinating. Another fact we know is the detail oriented nature of the franchise now, down to the smallest of details. Now, in fairness, Josh McDaniels was big on details. And that's fine and good. Not all of his staff was, and certainly not all the team. It didn't catch. Pete Carroll brings in his staff, and there were several of them that were minutia oriented. Patrick Graham, Rob Leonard, uh, others too. I'm not just saying Tom McMahon's that way. Greg Olson, but Greg wasn't here when Pete brought him. But Greg is that way. But several of them, Joe Philbin's that way. And so the Raiders, Pete's made it clear to his staff, details. Made it clear to his leaders, players, details. So that, like I told you the other day, I'm talking to players and none of them are even looking past training camp. It's all about details. I've talked to several players now since minicamp ended, and all of them with a litany, a list of things over these 6 weeks they've got to have improved or worked on ahead of training camp. Ahead of training camp. So it is vital that as you look at this and you read the room and you read the situation, what you're noticing is something that details matter. Details matter. And little things from eating. Okay, the players know what supplements to take, what supplements not to take. Okay, but then there are constantly new supplements coming out. And the Raiders are making sure, hey, here's a new supplement. Don't use it. It's like not just read the list. It's details as far as little things. A Raider coach literally working with a player about moving his foot back a quarter inch. A quarter inch. Details. Understanding this is what you bring to camp with you. Understanding when we tell you this time, this is what we mean. Understanding the schedule on the wall is not a suggestion. I'm going to tell you something. It used to drive Raider players crazy when there would be schedules, and it's happened a lot, not just one coach over the 6 years I've been here, where something's scheduled, but God only knows when that's going to happen. It's not this administration. If Pete Carroll says we're meeting at 10:30, you better be in your seat at 10:28. If he says we're ending at 12, you know you're ending at 12. It's details. It's going through. One player talked about learning plays under this new staff is incredibly difficult because of the amount of detail requested. I am a person who believes that details matter. And so the smaller the detail you pay attention to, the less something can go wrong. I'm going to tell you, the new coaches that have been brought in all have that, all have that attention to detail. And the coaches that were retained already had it. And Pete Carroll is doing a tremendous job of getting things down. And now the Raiders are paying attention to those little things, the littlest of details. Making sure you're taking a drink even when you're not thirsty because you're in the desert. Little things about treating your teammates. And that many of you may think, well, that's stupid. Well, it's not stupid. It's not stupid when you care about every little detail. And when you care about every little detail, but first care about the little details of the person's life. So I don't want to give away who I was talking to, but there was a player that had shared something to Pete Carroll in passing. And 2 weeks later, they're passing again, and Pete asks him about it. And I've shared other examples. This is one I've not shared previously, so don't try to assume the situation. I just want to protect that player from people figuring out who it was. And it moved this player that he had shared something with Pete because Pete had asked him in passing. And 2 weeks later, Pete remembered it because details matter. And so when you understand that they have player leadership and that it's now a detail oriented, one of the players said to me, I can't wait to see our travel schedule when we travel, because when they travel, each player gets an itinerary. And he goes, already our schedules are different. How detailed they are. I mean, they're giving the players. I remember under a couple of the previous coaches, one player saying to me, just tell us what's going on. We're not 12. And now that same player said to me, it's like, okay. I don't need to know all this information, because information empowers people. They feel they take ownership. And that's what's happening now. There is a detail orientedness in this franchise, from where your foot goes to where your eyes are, to taking a drink when you're not thirsty, to making sure you're careful on rehab, to diet, to family, to schedules, the whole thing. It's fascinating. And that's just another reason the little things are being addressed. Why I expect this Raiders team uh, to be different, because we're already seeing it. That's a big deal. We'll see you here tomorrow for the conclusion.